Right, let's talk about the LolCow of the French Revolution. And I'm not saying this to be insulting. After I finish the story, you will notice that the people treated her exactly the same way modern people treat LolCows, whether they deserve it or not. And the only difference is that she wasn't canceled, she got super canceled. And honestly, I don't think she deserved it, but she could have avoided it had she not been such a woman. You will see by the end of the video what I mean by this, and you will judge for yourself if I'm right or not. But anyway, her story begins with a marriage. She is 14 years old when she weds Louis the 16th. And that is correct, right? Like, Europe at the time was filled with pedophiles. Despite the fact that anime wasn't popular at the time, your ancestors really enjoyed marrying children to each other, very young ages. Sometimes they were children, other times the king may have been older. But it was customary at the time, right? So, like, these are our heritage. We come from a nation of pedophiles. I'm joking, by the way. I'm just, like, looking at the moral hysteria on Twitter, and so I'm trying to apply it in this video to make it a little bit more funny. Now, historians do tell us the type of person Marie Antoinette was at the age of 14. Apparently, the royal family of France has sent a guy in order to see what type of woman she's going to be like. And what they did find is that she didn't understand much French, couldn't speak it, didn't know much about the world. And the reason for it wasn't that she was dumb, she generally just didn't like to study. So she was an Austrian woman raised with an Austrian family and an Austrian culture. And despite the fact that she had tutors that did try to at least teach her a little bit of French history and a little bit of the French language, she just didn't learn. But they did say that she was actually quite smart. So, kind of like most teenagers that don't like school but like everything else. They also talk about how the handoff was being done. They went with the carriage all the way until the border of France, where they changed her clothes from Austrian clothes into French ones. And they even took her dog. Apparently the dog was an Austrian breed that was not a good look. It's a little bit sad. But anyway, the wedding is extravagant. I mean, not surprising. It's a royal wedding. And the two of them kind of liked each other, but not really in the sexual way. Which means that they didn't consummate the marriage. And this was quite concerning because a royal marriage at the time wasn't just about forging an alliance between France and Austria, but it was also about producing a male heir. You see, if a king in a medieval time didn't produce a male heir, it would cause destabilization in the country, which could lead to civil war, people dying, right? So you can understand why they're kind of concerned. But it turns out that one of the reasons why Louis wasn't interested in her was due to the fact that he was a little bit autistic. He enjoyed spending time alone. He was an introvert and enjoyed playing with locks a lot. And clocks, right? Locks and clocks. It was his hobby. And he wasn't really that interested in women. And it seems that it's not that he wasn't interested in her, because people say that she was a good-looking woman, is that he wasn't interested in women, period. Historians conclude that maybe he had genital dysfunction, which made sex painful. But whatever the case is, Marie Antoinette was quite affected by this. She really seemed to have wanted to have children, which is why she ends up adopting a lot of peasant boys. There's like a case where she almost runs over a peasant with her carriage and then finds out that the kid is an orphan, ends up adopting him. I don't know if this was a thing back then, you know, like for the queen to adopt like actual peasant children. But Marie Antoinette actually does this. And she's actually taking care of them. Like, she's not a bad person. She's not doing this like a Hollywood vanity thing where, you know, you adopt a child from Africa. One of the kids that she adopted was actually black. And spoiler warning, most of these kids are either going to be killed by the revolution or they're going to die from disease. Like, I'm not going to make a video for all of her adopted peasant kids, but you can look it up and find out what happened to each and every one of them. Sad stories all around. But my point is, like, she was actually a compassionate and empathetic person. Also very religious. But, like all people, she did have her vices. And that was to, well, I guess, like, be a teenage girl. The problem is when you're a modern 25-year-old teenage girl in revolutionary France, not good optics, you know? Like, if the peasants are starving and you're buying 320 clothes, not a good look. And the main problem is that for the time period, the royals were kind of the celebrities of that era. The same way that we watch Vosh, Hassan Piker, and we criticize them, the same way did the middle class and even the peasantry back then looked at the royals. Now, usually, and this was customary, was for the king to have a couple of concubines. And most of the media would focus on them. But because Louis was autistic and he was constantly playing with his locks and clocks, he didn't have a mistress. Which means that all of the hatred, the criticism, the attacks from the smear merchants went to his wife. And at the time, Louis doesn't do anything about it. And so she gets involved in a couple of scandals that will actually turn her into the LolCow of the French Revolution. Meaning that all of the hatred, all of the disillusion that the people are going to have with the monarchy are going to be solely channeled onto her, whether she deserves it or not. And there are 3 scandals that I'm going to go through, and you guys will see exactly how she didn't deserve any of it. The first one is the very popular saying, let them eat cake. So during a great hunger that happened in France due to crops failing, the media published the fact that Marie Antoinette has said, when she was informed that peasants are starving and there's no bread, she said, let them eat cake. Turns out that it wasn't her quote. This was a quote before she was even born. It wasn't even let them eat cake, it was let them eat brioche. Now, brioche, in the medieval context, was a law that the king passed in the event that there is no more bread for the bakers to start selling brioches. And brioches were very nutritional in value. They probably didn't taste very well. But it was pretty much like the person at the time saying, if there is hunger, if there is famine, start giving them the welfare checks. Now, the way the quote was translated to Marie Antoinette was, let them eat cake, which enraged the public. And again, like, they had no fact checkers at the time, you know, there was no way of verifying the information. It was, if a journalist published it, it must have been true. And that stuck with her. The fact that she would go around and be like a teenage girl, she was very extroverted, she enjoyed being the soul of the party, she had like these very bizarre hairstyles where it was like trying to make the hairstyle as long as possible by using wires and pillows and stuff, but extremely costly. The whole idea is like, look, I'm a noble, I have servants that do this shit for me. The fact that she bought herself an entire retreat in the woods, because during the castle, inside the French castle, you had almost no privacy. So she literally built like this summer vacation homes in the middle of the forest where she would meet with various nobles. And on the surface, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But when France is doing very poorly financially, that's pretty much a goldmine of gossip for the journalists. And think about it this way, right? If you're a noble, if you're a high person, and the queen invites you to her retreat, then, well, obviously it's nice, but what if she doesn't invite you? Well, now it generates animosity, right? And especially in an era where the men are busy fighting or doing administration, and the only thing that the women do are gossiping, and they're holding the finances of most estates. You can understand just how many enemies she managed to do by having like these parties. It's one thing when a teenage girl does it in 2025, right? Like she's a rich girl and she invites people over to her house so that they can have a slumber party or whatever the fuck. And doesn't invite what? Well, that's like TikTok gossip, that's social media bullshit. In France, if you did that, it was very dangerous because all those women did was to constantly gossip and talk. And so, yet again, like she's being treated as Madame Deficit. Like the reason that the French crown is losing money and the reason that people are starving is because of these extravagant parties that she's throwing. When in reality, she was just behaving like any other aristocrat, and historians have pointed out that she didn't actually move the needle one way or another. But again, anyone that understands internet culture and understands how LolCows work, it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. Like, as long as people believe it, they're more likely to believe the next accusations because they already think that this is a bad person, this is an individual that doesn't deserve being there. And so when you go to the next scandal, you will see why people believed it almost unanimously. The father of her husband, right, like the previous Louis, commissioned a great work of art. He commissioned a huge necklace, like extremely expensive, very extravagant, looked absolutely beautiful, and the jeweler had to spend many years working on it. Now the thing is, like, Louis the father dies, and then when the jeweler goes to the next king and basically tells him, look, like your father commissioned this, do you still want it? And because like France was in actual deficit, he said, no, I'm sorry, like we're going to refuse this. Now this is where a con artist comes in by the name of Jean d'Avalois Saint-Remy, who is contacting a cardinal claiming that she is a falsely distant royal descendant, and she actually represents the queen, and the queen really wants this necklace, but she doesn't want it in a public way, so like she requires an intermediary in order to purchase it. And so she fakes random letters to the cardinal trying to impersonate the queen, even hires a prostitute to pose as the queen, and apparently like this deceives the cardinal. Whether this was, legitimately what happened, or the cardinal and this con artist were working together, we will never know. But suffice to say is that the cardinal persuaded the jeweler to sell it to the con artist, and he sold it on credit, and then the con artist dismantled the necklace and sold the jewels individually to Paris and London. And so this created a huge scandal, because like, you gotta understand, from the perspective of the people, like you're starving, your daughter probably died of malnutrition, and now you find out in the papers that the queen is buying these insanely ridiculous, expensive items, and the reason you believe it is because she was already made a LolCow. Like she's already recognized for being Madame Deficit and spending so much cash. The media at the time, the newspapers, they don't talk about her charity work. They don't talk about like her donating to orphanages. They don't talk about her adopting peasants. They don't talk about her hardships in the real life with her king. No, what they talk about is the extravagant parties that she's throwing. What they're talking about is the fact that she likes gambling. She did, by the way. And so like people legitimately starts to have like this seething hatred of her. And in all of the newspapers, in all of the articles, like she's caricaturized as a harpy that sucks the blood of France. She's as I mentioned before, like legitimately turned into a LolCow. Like she's being memed by the press nonstop, viciously, and people genuinely hate her. Now, there's another issue. From her perspective, the country is going to shit, and it kind of was. It's not really her husband's fault that the country was going to shit. He kind of inherited like that from his father. One of the reasons is that France actually helped America with the revolution, and that did cause a deficit. Another reason is that their taxation system was antiquated, and the way that the government was run was not optimized for the modern era at the time. And so she actually does try to help. She notices that her husband was a very weak king, and I'll discuss on why that is when I make a video about him. But she does, try to make some reforms. The problem is, like, she's not trained to be a statesman. She's trained how to be a good mother. She is trained how to provide a son for the king. And so when she actually does try to dabble with politics, she ends up making it worse, which again amplifies the hatred that people have towards her. Now, eventually, she writes to her mother, and she's basically very upset that the king doesn't want to fuck her, and she can't provide an heir. And the mother responds that, oh, well, maybe you should try to give Louis more gentle caresses. And this is where it gets interesting. She actually sends one of her relatives over to help them have sex. I don't know what that means or how it works, but apparently it was successful because Marie Antoinette ends up having 4 children, has to watch 2 of them die of tuberculosis, and the other 2 managed to survive. Now, I did make a video about the harrowing of her young boy. Very painful, like the most tragic story in history. You guys should watch it. The other child actually manages to survive the French Revolution, even though like she's going to forever be changed and probably go through life with massive PTSD. But long story short, she manages to have children. Now, the French Revolution goes really bad for the royals. The storming of the Bastille was something that happened, where basically the revolutionaries managed to get weapons and gunpowder. And this doesn't seem to bother Louis that much, but it does freak the living shit out of her. And this is where she basically starts asking, like, hey, can we move? Like, do we have to stay here? And she kept insisting for Louis to move, but like he was like, no, he's not running away. He loves his people. And they're basically forced to experience their house broken into. It's called the Women's March, where it was mostly women, although some men, and they break into the palace. And they demand to see Madame Deficit, the reason that they're poor and starving. And so this is the point where the queen actually goes out and sees the mob, despite the fact that most of her advisors were telling her not to. And she goes out to a balcony, and she's very dignified and actually makes eye contact with the mob. And the historians say that the mob was actually impressed by this, that they actually started cheering for her. So like you kind of understand that when you saw her in person, she was not the caricature, the LolCow, that the journalists were trying to make her out to be. But still, having your house broken into and having some of your guards getting killed is not really a good look. And so this is the point where she actually was talking to her husband to not necessarily leave France, but at least try and go into a more defensible position. Like, try and go to a place where they would be more defended, because shit is starting to hit the fan. However, Louis doesn't want to listen to her. He loves his people. He doesn't want to be seen as the king that flees. But they did move away from their original palace. And this is the last time that they're going to see that palace. They end up going into Paris. And this is going to be a mistake, because Paris is actually occupied by the revolutionary forces. And from now on, every time the king negotiates, he has to negotiate from a position of weakness, because he is surrounded by people that don't really like him. Now, he makes another mistake, although I don't know if it's really something that he could have avoided, but he ends up firing a minister that was a populist. Like, this minister was really big on revolutionary ideals, and he tried making reforms that were very popular with the people. And when he does that, the press goes wild. And there's this huge mob of individuals that storm his house. And they kill a lot of the guards. The queen has to barricade herself into a room in order to protect her children. There's a very famous painting which shows her like being dignified, staring down the mob that are calling her the Austrian whore, that want to get to her kids. And she already saw some of the guards dying, but like she refuses to flinch. She just stares them down and has her kids behind her. So like that's a very powerful moment. But they also go to the king, and they force him to wear a revolutionary hat. They force him to drink alcohol. They poke him with spears, like incredibly disrespectful. Yet, despite being autistic, Louis somehow manages to convince the mob to leave the palace. And so I want you to place yourself into the shoes of Marie Antoinette. A lot of French people that I spoke with, they genuinely think that she was a traitor, that she was basically like trying to get France to become an Austrian puppet. And the reason for why they believe this is because, well, that's what history shows. Like, she was convicted of being a traitor and molesting her son. And that's what got her guillotined. But if you're actually looking at the chain of events up until now, you realize that this was a 14-year-old girl that was trained for most of her life on how to be a good mother and provide a son for the king that she's going to marry. And as most teenage girls do, she had a life that was extroverted. She enjoyed partying. Sure, like she enjoyed gambling and whatnot. But she was a queen. Like, this wasn't unprecedented for her class. And it wasn't something that most queens didn't do at the time anyway. And she really loved kids. Like, she adopted a lot of peasant kids. So she genuinely wanted to have kids. Now, when you have your palace broken into, which is literally her house, it does sound magnanimous. It's like, well, it's a palace, right? But at the end of the day, it's the place where she sleeps, right? Where her kids sleep. And not once, but twice, you have like all these people that are coming in. They're hurling insults at you and your husband. They're killing your guards. They're violent, vicious people. And your children are in danger. When she suggested that the royals should actually leave Paris and go closer towards Austria, do you think she was doing that because she was running geopolitics in her head? Or was it, these are the only people on Earth that could probably save us or keep us safe until this whole shit dies down? Because I honestly think that the reason she's going to do the thing which got the royals actually guillotined is not because she was a Tywin Lannister character, but because she was a very concerned mother. And so this is where she makes the decision, which is at the same time extremely smart, but also the thing that's going to kill them. She decides that the family should leave Paris. There was a group of people that were loyal to the king, closer to Austria, and so if the king managed to go there, like, he would negotiate from a position of strength. Now, the idea itself is not bad. Like, this definitely is something that I would have done if I didn't have hindsight. And eventually the king agrees. But here's where the problem is. The original concept of the escape plan was for everyone to ride down really fast. Like, separate carriages for different family members. And they would basically make a break for it. And that was the original idea. She declined. She said no, like, the family has to stay together. And she also insisted on this luxurious carriage that was called a Berlin. It was a massive carriage. I think it was pulled by 12 horses or something. Incredibly extravagant. Basically like a royal procession. Now, it's easy to judge her in hindsight, but, when you're an aristocrat, the way you conduct yourself is the way you can negotiate. So basically, like, if you arrive in your rags and in your tattered clothes to the loyalists, it's not a good look. Like, you're not going to negotiate from a position of strength. It doesn't make you seem like you're the Queen of France or the King of France. It makes you seem like you're an escaped convict. Which pretty much they were, but you get what I'm saying. And so they actually left the way that a king is supposed to leave, with a royal percussion. And the problem is that that carriage broke down several times. They actually stopped at various taverns and places in order to eat. And one of the French, I think it was a mailman or something, they recognized the king. And they recognized the king by looking at not a dollar bill, a franc or whatever the fuck they had. They looked at the money and they saw the king's face on the money. And so they're basically informing the Revolutionary Guard. They come in, they find the royals, they surround them, and they bring them back to the palace. And it said that when they were brought back, no one took their hats off, which was the respectful thing to do. No one cheered, no one booed. They just treat them with disgust and disdain. And the reason for this is that the revolutionary, up until this point, believe that they can have a constitutional monarchy. Like, they didn't actually want to kill any of the royals. And they thought that the king is going to go along with it. Well, apparently he wasn't. And so at this point, the monarchy loses the moderates. Like, none of the people that were supporting the royals are going to support them anymore. France is now at war with Austria. And so the royalists are being accused of treason. Like, they want Austrian forces to come and murder Parisians in order to free the royals. The moderates are called insane. Like, obviously, they don't want a constitutional monarchy. Look what they're doing. And so the only group left was the Jacobins, the extremists. The communists, pretty much. Well, not communists in ideology, but in behavior. They're going to be the first ones that start the world's first secret police force. Anyway. The king manages to hold it together for a couple more months until he refuses to sign some revolutionary edicts, which I would probably not have signed as well. Another group of revolutionaries break into their palace for the third time. And this time they were actually prepared. They had their Swiss Guard. And the Swiss Guard, they had like kill zones established. They were professionals. They knew how to hold the building. But this is where the king and his family manages to flee to, the equivalent of the parliament, trying to seek refuge. And initially they're allowed, and the king writes a letter in order to order his guard, his Swiss guard, to stand down. Now, you can see that he wasn't really a tyrant. I mean, he didn't want the blood of the people on his hands, even when it was about self-defense and even when he was in the right. And what ends up happening is that the Swiss Guard actually do follow the order. They do drop their weapons, and most of them get absolutely slaughtered. Like, the Revolutionary Guard didn't want to take any prisoners. They just sacked the palace. They killed most of the Swiss Guard. And this is when the king doesn't have any leverage anymore. Like, he doesn't have any people to protect him. He doesn't have any loyalists remaining. And for the people in the revolution, the actual parliamentaries, the representative of the estates, they realize that, well, do we really need the king? And what happens when the angry mob that stormed the palace is going to come to storm us? And so they put the king on trial, found him guilty of treason, executed him. I'll probably make another video and explain what happened with him. But Marie Antoinette herself, I mean, she goes from being a queen to being in a small cell where she was allowed initially to have a couple of servants taking care of her. But all she has is herself and her children. And basically it said that she was singing Austrian lullabies to her kids whenever there was a mob outside to try and drown out the noises. Her son, Louis, was 8 years old, and when the guillotine happened and she asked, it's like, what happened to daddy? She said that he's in heaven now. She would constantly groom him and tell him that a prince has to look beautiful even when no one is watching. And she was allowed to do this for quite a few months until the Revolutionary Guard came in and literally rips the kid away from her lap. There's historian accounts saying that her nails broke, like trying to cling to him as she was crying. And so for the remaining months, like, she actually expects exile. She doesn't think that they will kill her. But they actually do use her child in order to fabricate a statement that she molested him. And they also accuse her of treason, that she's the Austrian whore, which is trying to get France to lose the war against Austria. And they put her on this trial where it said that she actually maintained herself with dignity and composure. And the only time she broke down in tears was when they accused her of having molested her child. And she said that she's not going to dignify such a nonsense accusation, and made a plea to all the mothers there to allow her to have some dignity. And historians say that this actually moved a lot of people in the room, and even like some of the most hardcore revolutionaries, they looked at the tribunal and they went like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, even for that era where a lot of people legitimately hated her, even they went like, you guys are going a little bit too far here. And she's sentenced to be executed. She will spend the remaining of her months alone in a prison cell. And I want you to understand what this means. This means complete isolation. The guards weren't allowed to talk to her. You're pretty much placed in what is like a basement. And there's nothing to do. Like, you have no books to read. You have no one to talk to. The food that comes is probably spoiled because, like, people enjoyed taking the piss on her. And it said that her hair actually started going white from the stress. And she is allowed to write one last letter to her family. And as I said in my video about her son, this is one of the biggest kindnesses that history allowed her, is to not know the fate of her children. Because at this point, she actually believes that her kids are going to make it. They haven't been convicted with any crime. They're still young. And so she would think that maybe the revolutionaries are going to send them into exile or they're going to ransom them. Whatever the case, she didn't know what's going to happen to Louis, and that's a really good thing because that would probably have broken her. But in the letter, she states that she hopes her kids will be raised in a manner as to not hate the people of France for what they did to their parents. And she doesn't want the kids to seek vengeance for what's going to happen to her. And so you can see that she wasn't really a tyrant. And based on her behavior, she was actually a very charitable and compassionate woman. And she was still a Christian, you know, by the time she died. Like, she was genuinely appealing to mercy, to forgiveness. And she didn't want her kids to grow up with the hate. And so they take her and they dress her in white. I think they tied her hands. She was malnourished by the time of her execution. They shaved her hair. And historians say that she conducted herself with extreme dignity. She didn't beg. She didn't try to look weak. The only thing that she did was accidentally step on the foot of her executioner. And she said her famous last words, "Pardon me, sir, I did not mean it." And after she died, the executioner lifted her head and showed it to the crowd so that they can finally see that the tyranny of the Austrian whore was over.
Thousand heads roll to the ground. The blades sang sharp with a chilling sound. To keep us safe, they claimed, they swore. But safety's a wolf at your chain.